client of mine was a few weeks into a cut when his colleagues said to him, "Why are you cutting? You're skinny. You should be gaining first." That's when he came back to me and said, "When is this cut gonna end? I think I'm lean enough already." And this is from a man who, in his own words, said that he still had a belly. But here's what his colleagues didn't know. Before I was coaching him, he'd spent years listening to advice similar to that. Too scared to push his weight up, too scared to diet down, just stuck in the middle, and his physique didn't change at all. And if you can relate to any part of this story, by the end of this video, you're gonna have your answer. Should you bulk, cut, or hold? When you can't decide which one to do, you're kind of stuck between these two fears. If you bulk, you're going to get too fat. And if you cut, you're going to lose the small amount of muscle that you have. So you end up committing to neither and hope that you just recomp. And for the skinny fat lifters, the fear is that you gain fat faster in your stomach than you gain muscle in your arms. So when you bulk for that position, you end up just looking fatter with seemingly no extra muscle. The thing is, you don't get both at the same time. It comes in phases. And it doesn't matter which one that you start with, you just have to commit to it. Cut first and accept that you look a tiny bit skinnier for a while, or bulk first and accept that feeling of a little bit more fatter for a while. And it's a little bit similar to laser treatment for your skin. You don't just do one session and then walk out with this perfect, immaculate skin. It takes rounds of treatment. And after each round, you slowly improve when your skin heals. The people who get the physique are the ones who do the rounds. And those who stay stuck are the ones who are half committing, doing a little bit of both, but seemingly getting nothing of either. And there's some bodybuilders who talk about the principle of main gaining or body recomposition, but often these are the people who've been training for 20 or 30 years, and the amount of muscle that they have to gain is going to be very minimal. They're going to be much closer to fulfilling their genetic potential, and for them, that's probably a smart idea. But you're likely not that person, and you've still got most of your muscle ahead of you to gain. So making a clean choice here is very important. And even though you could go in either direction, there's still some things that I would consider before making your final choice. So consideration one is, where are you actually starting from? Do you have abs? Do you have faint abs? Or do you still have a belly? Or are you skinny? Or maybe just skinny fat? And if you're relatively lean, the clear answer is to bulk. Trying to stay shredded whilst growing is how you're going to spin your wheels for years. Muscles built doing things that you've just simply never done before. And if you're skinny fat, personally, I would recommend cutting first, because building from a skinny fat position means it's going to be way harder to see progress. So you'll probably end up giving up or question whether it's even working, and long-term commitment to any phase is exactly what you need. You'll likely also have worse food tolerance and digestion, which makes gaining harder because you're going to feel full all the time. Now, if you genuinely don't care about gaining fat or some of the other negative side effects, you can always bulk, but I don't think you're that person watching this video. Otherwise, you probably would have already made up your mind. If you're here, you're probably the skinny fat lifter who's trying to make that decision. And for you, it's probably going to be cutting first. But there is another person. Maybe you're in the middle. Maybe you've got some faint abs. You're not overweight, but you're also not super lean either. And this is where your training log is going to make the call. Are your lifts actually improving? Do you do the same exercises with the same form for more reps or more load each week? If your lifts are going up, you're likely growing right now. So I would continue to bulk. I would fuel that training. I would protect the progress rather than now cutting and going into a deficit. But if your lifts aren't progressing and you're on the softer end, then I would likely diet, because, well, you've got nothing else to lose. And if your honest answer is that you don't actually know because you don't have a set program or you don't track your lifts, then I probably would look at fixing that first, because you can't manage what you don't measure. Outside of food, training is the most important factor for muscle growth. Without training, you don't grow any muscle, regardless of if you're bulking, because bulking without training is basically society. Everybody overeats, but not everybody looks like C-bum, because training is the precursor. When I stopped logging my training, that was when I had the least idea if what I was doing is actually helping me gain or not. And things changed when I got much more meticulous with tracking my lifts and training. Because when you log your lifts, it holds you accountable to that number. I knew what I did last week, so I knew exactly what I needed to do or what I was capable of this week. And I could finally see that progress. And the final but most important consideration is the one that most people and most books tend to skip, is what can you actually adhere to? This is the context. What does your life actually look like in the next 12 to 16 weeks? Is it actually smart to diet right now when when you might be going on a cruise or a holiday, or your wife's potentially giving birth. There's no best time to do things, but there are certainly better times. And I had a client who was about to travel for work for a full month. They were living out of hotels, company dinners, drinks, the usual corporate kind of stuff. Because we knew what was coming, we planned for it. We saved more calories, made more careful choices at dinners, and at the end of it, we did make it work, but it was a lot harder than it needed to be. And if he hadn't needed to diet through that month, it would have been far easier to just pick a clearer stretch and a run of normal weeks with none of those socials. Because ideally with fat loss, you want to pick a window with the least disruption if possible. And if there isn't that clear window, then going into a building phase might simply just be a better option. I've personally experienced a harder version of this myself during my own contest prep. Every other week meant that I have dinner at my in-laws where my father-in-law did the cooking, and I had no idea what he was going to be cooking up. I always tried to save more calories. I usually tried to eat more vegetables at that meal, but I remember one time watching him pour oil over those veggies after dishing it up and thinking nothing is actually safe in this meal. And that is the reality. Real life doesn't care about your macros. Real life doesn't care that you're dieting. So it's really important that you look at your next 3 months of your life honestly and pick the option where you think you're most likely going to adhere to. And if your life is just always chaotic like my clients and it never changes, then click the video link below, because I share the exact method that I used through those situations. It's what I did with him and also how I got into stage condition 2 whilst having a social meal every other week. And the final thing before you fully commit to your decision, and I think this is more of a prerequisite, is what have you actually currently been doing? Have you been cutting successfully, or do you feel like you've been dieting your whole life? Because if you've been dieting for a while and it feels like you're struggling to do it, it might be worth going into a bulk rather than cut. Story time. I had a client, let's call her Sarah to keep her a little bit more anonymous. Sarah came to me saying that she was eating around 1,000 calories per day, but she wasn't losing weight. She jumped from 2 different coaches previously, and each one had actually cut her calories lower and lower. So when she came to me, I decided to break that pattern. I gradually took her calories up over a few weeks, and she didn't gain a single kilo. I managed to find her true maintenance calories. She was adhering better to her nutrition. She was no longer overeating because she wasn't saving about 80% of her daily calories for a meal out. And only after holding her there for a while did I then take her through a fat loss phase. And for the first time ever, her body actually responded. And this is one of the reasons that I get my clients to go through an initial prime phase. You might be someone who's similar to Sarah, or I often see guys in the reverse too, where they actually say that they're eating lots of calories, but they're still not able to gain any weight. So going through that prime phase where you reset helps your body become way more responsive. So if your last few years kind of looks a little bit like Sarah's, you probably don't need to cut, and actually spending a little bit more time at maintenance instead might be a better option for you, so that you can get your body in a much better place and ready to respond before you begin to push it. So a quick recap. If you can't see yourself adding more fat to your current physique, then I would cut. If you're lean already, then I would build. If you're somewhere in between, then let your trainer decide. And if you're making really good progress in the gym, then fuel it by bulking. And make sure that you're choosing it wisely based on your timeline. If you have lots of socials or important life events, it might just be a better option to bulk first. And if you've been through years of back-to-back failed dieting, then maintenance is probably going to be your best option. But even with the right phase, if you pair it with the wrong training, it's still going to get you nowhere. So that's why I created the T-Shirt Physique Audit, to help you find the leap between your effort and also your physique. And I've made it completely free. A 2-minute quiz that you can do with a 7-day plan on how to fix the leak once you find out. And I'll link it in the description below, so make sure that you go check that out. And if you stayed until the end, make sure that you like, subscribe, tell a friend, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.